Mr. Manager, I guess we're about ready to start. Commissioner Unruh won't be here today, but he is going to be watching it long distance, so speak slowly so that he can understand everything.
Yes, sir. I understand I'm getting an Academy Award when he gets back, so that'll be nice. Good morning, Commissioners. Our first presentation this morning will be finance. That's why you have breakfast to try and keep you awake, because I know it's not the most exciting topic first thing in the morning. We'll talk through the operations of the Division of Finance. We'll talk about budgeted transfers, contingency reserves, bond interest, and then interest bank arena, all under the finance umbrella. And then I also will be presenting the community development section of the budget, so you should have both of those handouts at your seats. So the manager had requested last year that for this next budget process, divisions work toward preparing strategic plans. And so the Division of Finance worked to craft individual strategic plans for each of the sections. So budget, accounting, and purchasing each have their own, as does economic development. And then we use that to put together a larger overall strategic plan. So the presentation you'll see today reflects the differences that we have, so it will look just slightly different from what you saw last year. The new mission for the Division of Finance is to assure accurate financial reporting and informed planning and decision-making through continuous employment of best practices to ensure effective and proper stewardship of public resources. Again, the divisions we'll talk about today include finance operations, so the CFO office, accounting, budget and purchasing. We'll talk again about budgeted transfers and these others listed up here. We have responsibility within our division for about $59.2 million of the overall $425 million you'll hear about today. Operations themselves are about 13% of our overall responsibility. It's everything else that makes up the bulk of what we do. So we do that again with FTEs in each of these sections. This slide illustrates what those are and what their primary job responsibilities are. So within the CFO's office, we have 7.25 FTEs. We have assumed the responsibility for risk management within the CFO's office, so this does reflect that change. We provide strategic planning, division oversight, tax system oversight, budget support for internal financial audit functions, and risk management coordination. And then we also obviously contract with the external vendor for the required annual audit. Within budget, 5 FTEs provide financial forecasting, budget development, monitoring, and reporting to ensure divisions live within their resources. Within accounting, we have 15 FTEs that oversee and process revenue and expense transactions, ensure timely completion of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or the CAFR, and also, again, as a result of the way the risk management function itself was kind of spread across finance, accounting is now responsible for the workers' compensation program as well. And while it's not listed here, of course, they also do our payroll, which makes them some of the very favorite people for everyone in the county. And then purchasing has 8 FTEs that oversee and implement Charter 68 and other procurement activities for the organization. So the CFO's 2019 budget request can be found on page 69. And you can see here the programs listed in slightly more detail about what our office provides. Again, we have redone our strategic business plan, and so these measures reflect some of those changes. Of course, the overall county strategic plan says that we will have the CAFR done by June 30th each year, that all divisions will adhere to their budgets so that we won't have anyone exceeding their budget authority within a year, that we will implement audit recommendations and set an overarching finance policy for the organization. You can see that this one is asterisked. In our strategic plan, we did have a goal to try and get this done by April 30th, but quite simply other things came up, and so we're pushing this out to June 30th, and this is something we're working in conjunction with the internal financial auditors to get that done. Of course, another high priority for us is to preserve our high bond ratings. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with the internal financial auditors who are technically report to the deputy county manager on a regular basis, at least monthly, that we all sit down together. Within Division of Finance, we want to set some training programs for ourselves, and so we have a goal to have that done by June 30. And finally, we want to seek and support finance technology improvements. And so throughout all of our strategic plans, there are actually specific goals tied to the specific softwares that we use. One you'll hear about, of course, is the upgrade to our SAP system when ITSS comes and presents, and so that's something that's also within our strategic plan to make sure we're coordinating that. So we do have a couple slides of tables of metrics related to risk management. We used to show these within that function of the budget, but again, that function has been absorbed within the CFO's office. And so you can see over 5 years what the cost of risk per employee is and what the cost of workers' compensation per employee is. I would tell you that that decrease in 2017 is largely related to turnover and vacancies and positions within risk management, and so we simply didn't have to pay out as much. Our contractuals and commodities were mostly flat. Looking at our budget request for 2019 in terms of dollars, you'll see that it's actually a slight decrease, and you can see what those significant adjustments include. As you probably remember, earlier this year you did approve some staffing table changes for finance. We did eliminate a risk manager position, as well as the safety training coordinator in that particular fashion. We eliminated both of those positions, but then we did add an administrative manager, and we shifted a portion of the internal performance auditor out of the county manager's office and into the finance budget because that individual has some specific safety background that we think we can take advantage of in standing up a more robust safety program for the organization. We also, as a virtue of some reorganization toward the end of last year, Brent Shelton it has taken on the additional duties of acting as our economic development director, and so half of his position, which is what he estimates about the amount of time he's spending on those efforts these days, has actually been shifted out of the CFO office and into the economic development program budget to more realistically show how we're spending those dollars, and so you'll see that within the community development presentation. Again, the biggest decline is in personnel related to those significant adjustments on the prior slide. Overall, we did shift some budget authority out of accounting into the CFO's office because we do have that new administrative manager position, and we did want that function to have a little bit of budget authority, especially as we move forward with contract compliance. That's a new program we're standing up. We don't have any decision packages, alternative reductions, or revenue packages within the CFO office. So moving to budget, which is on page 74, the mission for budget is to be a trusted, recognized leader in public sector financial and resource management. Of course, one of the core functions of budget is to prepare the annual certified budget that is required by state law. They also do financial and program analysis, do budget administration, and are responsible for a number of monthly, quarterly, and annual reports that you all receive. And they also get the pleasure of being here for all of these. Their strategic measures are across the next few slides. Again, as we said, the overall county strategic plan requires that divisions, 100% of divisions live within their allocated budgets within a year. That was met in 2017. Also, as a part of their new strategic plan, they want to make sure that, of course, all statutory provisions are adhered to, and certainly that hasn't been an issue thus far. They want to make sure that routine budget transactions are handled in a timely fashion. They want to make sure that monthly and quarterly reports are distributed to you all as required by our policies. And of course, they work to make sure that projections are accurate. Another measure that is not necessarily budget's sole responsibility, of course, but something that we want to make sure that we're looking at, and this seems to be the best place to slot that, is how are we doing in terms of maintaining our unrestricted fund balance in the general fund. We do have a policy that says we will maintain at least 20% of budgeted general fund expenditures per year. And so what this slide shows is 5 years. That available fund balance, the blue bar, is really that unrestricted fund balance number. You can see that we have drawn that down a bit over time, deliberately for the most part, on one-time CIP projects. You can see that that red line reflects the percentage of general fund expenditures that we're at for each year. In the most recent year, we were at about, you can see, 27%. So we are still maintaining a very healthy balance. I would tell you that as budgets in the general fund go up, of course, the amount of minimum that we're required to retain goes up. And so even if we're not necessarily incurring a deficit, the amount of available fund balance from year to year will change by virtue of the budget we adopt. Looking at a slightly different measure, this is the amount of personal in a price of government metric. It basically takes all of the revenues that we receive from all sources and divides it by the total amount of personal income in the county. And so this slide shows over time essentially what that price of government metric is. What we have heard, what the study was done, is essentially that at some point, if we tax too much and we require too much revenue, we'll get pushback from citizens for requiring too much. If at some point services decline and they aren't getting enough service, they'll push back for that reason. What they have found is that the price of government tends to correlate with that. When it gets too low, that means the services aren't being provided at an adequate level. When it gets too high, that means we need to start maybe looking at our operations and making some recommendations to you to bring that price of government down. You can see that since 2010, we've been below $1. We're hovering around that 84-cent mark. As you've been hearing about many of the demands lately, that certainly could be an indicator that we need to start increasing service, and we may start to see it tick up in some of these indicators, particularly as personal income increases within the community. Budget's 2019 request went down, as you can see, largely in personnel. That's primarily due to turnover within positions as we've transitioned over the last year or so. Overall, while personnel went down 7.8%, the other categories stayed the same, and so that mitigated the overall impact of personnel so that the overall budget just went down 7.4%. There are no decision packages, alternative reductions, or revenue packages for budget. Shifting gears to accounting, on page 77 of your binders. Of course, they do general accounting and financial reporting. They do payroll, workers' compensation, accounts payable, handle the county's banking services, work with investment and cash management, and do grant management. Again, the overall county strategic plan says that we will have the CAFR completed by June 30 each year. This table here shows you what those dates of publication have been the last 5 years, and you can see that we are consistently meeting our internal goal of having it done by March 30. We think that gets us done well in advance to make sure that we know exactly our financial condition as we go into the budget process, and we really like having that information early in the year. We did have in 2016, as a result of turnover in contracts and staff, a later date, but still well within that established time frame. We also have are working harder now toward making sure that departments understand our standard contractual provisions of saying that the vendors will be paid within net 30. That doesn't necessarily mean from the date finance receives it. That net 30 date means from the day the company sends the invoice to the date we pay it. We want that to be 30 days. And so that's a metric that our system isn't set up right now to track well. And so that's a measure that we'll be tracking going forward, and you'll start to see as we go forward. In terms of electronic versus paper checks, I think this is a fascinating slide personally. You can see that over time we have increased the amount of electronic payments we do. We also have slightly decreased our number of paper checks, but the number of payments issued by accounts payable has gone down over time, and that's a good thing because that means that people are using our new PPS system effectively. They're able to get bills sent and invoices paid through purchase orders, planning for annual shopping carts, and so that's a good thing. That's an efficiency we like to see. Within accounting, they are funded with two funds, the general fund and the workers' compensation fund. Overall, that decrease in workers' compensation is related to the elimination of half of the risk manager position that had been funded out of that fund. And so you'll see that reflected in personnel here. Again, we did take some budget authority out of accounting and reallocate it to the CFO's office for that new administrative management role that's occurring. And that's why there's an overall decrease here. Accounting has no decision packages, alternative reductions, or revenue packages. Shifting gears to purchasing on page 83. Purchasing's mission is to facilitate the procurement of all necessary products and services for Sedgwick County by following all applicable rules and laws governing government procurement in order to protect the monetary assets, through prudent expenditure of taxpayers' money. That means more than just Charter 68 compliance. That also means handling all of the informal procurement that happens outside of the charter if it's less than $10,000, doing informal bids and proposals. And then, of course, once we have a contract, working with suppliers to make sure that our relationships are good and that problems are being resolved quickly before we get to serious trouble. Before I get into the strategic measures you'll see here for purchasing, this is something that as a part of purchasing strategic business plan, they are setting new metrics by the end of the year. And so we're continuing with the metrics you've seen in the past, but know that those things will be updated. In addition, we're going to start providing some more statistics to you, particularly things like maybe local preference, how much of our business is being done with local vendors or maybe state of Kansas vendors. And so you'll start seeing that information in the future as well. As you can see here, the percent of all solicitations that are sent out where we get multiple vendor responses is really high. It was at 97% last year, and it's certainly showing the right trend in terms of its growth over time. The average number of vendors responding to a solicitation likewise also has gone up, and so you can see that we had 9.4 responses on average in 2017. In terms of the percent of responses received from disadvantaged business enterprises, this trend also is going the right way. About 17% of our responses were from those DBEs in 2017. And again, the number of purchase orders created in SAP has gone down over time. Again, this is another sign of efficiencies, that people are doing a better job of planning long-term, making annual shopping carts, and planning what they're going to spend their money on earlier in the process. And again, you may see some of these measures, but you may see some others in next year's presentation. Purchasing is funded exclusively out of the general fund. You can see that their budget is the only one you'll see within finance that ticked up slightly. You can see that that's in personnel. Essentially, that's the reason, or the reaction to 2 new employees who came on with higher benefits than their predecessors related to turnover. The rest of the budget, while there are some changes between categories, is flat. There are no decision packages, alternative reductions, or revenue packages for purchasing. So looking at finance operations overall, the budget request is down about 1.5% to just more than $7.5 million across each of those entities we've discussed. And you can see that breakout also by category on this slide. Again, overall personnel is down related to those significant adjustments we explained earlier in the presentation. So shifting gears now out of finance operations to budgeted transfers. Just to clarify what this is, state law does say that counties may not transfer money between funds unless it is explicitly authorized by statute. And so what we try and do here is get commission approval, because it does require board approval to do any transfers between funds. We try and predict what that will look like and then build that into the budget. So what you'll see here is a flat request with 2018, $1.5 million. Of that, about $1.2 million is anticipated to go to risk management operations. We do settlements, pay property insurance and things out of the risk management fund, and so this is to reimburse that fund at year end for actual expenses incurred. And so this number can fluctuate, but based on the budget request for risk management, this is how much we believe we'll need to transfer in to balance that fund at year end. We also used to use this fund for grant matches. A good example would have been the Violence Against Women Act. That was a grant that the DA's office historically used to receive. They don't receive that anymore, but this would have been a source of funds. Likewise, if something comes up throughout the year where we want to apply for a grant and it requires a match, this would allow us to do an actual cash transfer to that grant fund to support whatever match we're required to do. Within contingency reserves on page 90, it may appear as though we're asking for $2 million more in budget authority than what we had in 2018, but let me assure you that is not the case. What we're doing for each of these contingencies, but for community programs, is returning it to its 2018 adopted level. So if you were to look in your books on this page, you would see that each of these 2018 adopted columns are exactly the same as the 2019 request. We have added one new contingency, and that is this community programs contingency. And that was funded with a shift of budget authority from economic development contractuals to this fund center. This is intended to be used for things like maybe funding Boundless Playscape requests or museum requests that we've received.
So this is the new slush fund then?
Well, we would have to transfer any budget authority from this to an active budget, and the idea of putting in a contingency is giving control to commissioners.
That's a roundabout way to say yes. Thank you. Okay.
Shifting to bond and interest, this is our debt service fund, and you will see that we are expecting an increase in 2019. That includes just less than $3.8 million to pay off our 2009 GO Build America bonds. Essentially, if it has a 2019 call date, and that means that if we essentially pay off that amount then, we can save more than $715,000 in interest over the next 10 years. And so we will have a planned drawdown of fund balance in the bond and interest fund to support this, but we think it makes very good financial sense for the organization. And so for now, that's what we'll plan to do unless we hear back from commissioners that that's something that you're not interested in doing. And I'm happy to provide any more details on that if necessary. Okay. Looking at Interest Bank Arena then, completely changing gears. This will be under the Community Development tab in your books, or I'm sorry, Culture and Recreation, page 554. This is within the finance presentation because as CFO I do also have the privilege of being the contract administrator for the Interest Bank Arena. And so the mission that the county has set for the arena is that it be a modern first-class sports and entertainment venue owned by Sedgwick County, operated by SMG, providing 15,000 seats for basketball games. The Interest Bank Arena is home to indoor sporting events, concerts, family shows, and other entertainment. One of the distinctions that we've been asked to kind of add as we move through this, again, is that we do have financial statements that report on our asset and will show depreciation, but that is not on a budgetary basis, which is what we do the budget on, information that pertains to how that fund does business. And so there is a qualification on here that explains that this is not a GAAP basis, this is a budgetary basis, and that's why you'll see that notation. You'll also see that the 2019 request is significantly less than 2018. That is driven by the asset replacement plan, again, that Mr. Holt coordinated with AJ and the SMG folks before he retired last year. So we continue to use that number. You'll see how that is spread out here. The capital improvement program is where you'll see the bulk of those savings. We have had an increase in contractuals. This is essentially for the signage and other things that we turn over to the arena, along with a budgeted amount for emergency repairs that tend to happen around $69,000 to $70,000 per year. If you saw that sheet I sent on Wednesday. And so this is simply a placeholder for that budget authority and within a budgeted fund instead of over in the fund where essentially the sales tax reserve. So with that, that's finance. We'll switch gears now to community development unless there's any questions before I move off.
I have a question for what you're doing so far.
Commissioner Howell?
All right, let's. I don't know if I should stop things when they happen or just come back to them later on. So I'm sorry for that. But, let me find my questions here. You are very fast, by the way. I have a hard time keeping up with you.
I apologize.
Just fine.
I figure I'm trying to keep you awake.
Well, one of my questions on slide 13, that intentional drawdown. Can you highlight the things that were? You said they were CIP related, like one time expenditure. I understand the elephant exhibit was probably one of those. I see between 14 and 15 there's a $4.3 million drawdown, but that was a $5.3 million expenditure. So I'm curious the other $1 million. We only did 4.3 from drawdown, and money in from somewhere else, or how'd that work?
Within 2015, and I'm going to talk more about our budgeted transfers fund, less so than our debt service fund. You may recall that we did a lot of cash-funded projects. So in 2015, we spent about $1.6 million from budgeted transfers. In 2016, we spent $8.3 million from that, $4.9 million for planned CIP expenses. We did about $2.1 million for Ronald Reagan cash. And then we also, of course, had the fraud loss in 2016. And so we essentially needed to make two payments for the same expense, the one fraudulent payment and then the one where we actually paid the company. And so we had to do a transfer out of the general fund to that sales tax road and bridge fund to help pay for that, which of course we've been reimbursed now, but that activity can't occur in that same fiscal year because it's closed.
That was a 15 to 16 you just talked about, right?
Yes, sir.
But every year on this chart is going down, 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 down. So every one of these years, would every one of these be considered like a deficit spending?
Not
so to speak,
necessarily. There were some years actually where we had a surplus. What the function of this is not necessarily on the budget side. It's when we look at our accounting statements. And so if we had any commitments going from one year to the next, then that would have been considered restricted. And so as a result, we wouldn't have been able to count that expense. You mentioned the elephant barn. That would have been a restriction because we had already committed to spend that money. And so that would reduce the amount of unrestricted budget authority. And this is simply a measure of how much available fund balance we have from year to year. And it's not necessarily just a reflection of did we spend that cash the year before.
Okay. So the bonds we just did this last year, that doesn't replenish any of this 2.1 we did out of this? Are unrelated or?
Well, on this slide, so this would be only the general fund.
Right.
On that one, we'll start to see that pick up in the debt service fund. And certainly in 2017, we hadn't had any of that activity. And so that wouldn't be reflected on here. That all occurred within 2018.
On the next slide, you talked about 0.84 cents per dollar in the community. Is this is the first time I've ever seen this slide that I'm aware of. I don't know if I've seen this before. If I have,
I was going to ask about that too.
I forgot about it. But I'm curious. Is there some defined goal on what we should spend per dollar?
If you talk to economists, they'll tell you around $1 is where people tend to be most satisfied. But you'll also find metrics or opinions from other economists who say that's nonsense and it completely depends on your community and what types of revenue you have. So I don't know that we could set a goal for ourselves, but I don't know that we would want to use a certain one at this point.
Just for fun, it might be fun for you to calculate how much more revenue would have to be in our budget, revenue and expenditures to make it up to that number. I think the only way to get there would be obviously, I think, revenue generation, in other words, tax increases, something, and more programs. I don't know that people in our community, our community may be different. I'm not sure we would fit that model. So anyway, it's an interesting discussion, but if I've seen this slide before, I'm not aware of it. Did you want to say another question on that? Go ahead.
So can you just explain what this is? So 84 cents.
0.84.
Sorry, 0.84 of personal income.
So essentially, it takes all of the revenues we receive in a year. So our MABCD charges, which we've seen an uptick in, it takes our sales taxes, our motor vehicle taxes, it takes everything, and that becomes your numerator up here on the top. Down below, it says, what is the aggregate personal income for your county? And it divides that.
And what
top
is that
number.
in Sedgwick County?
I will be happy to provide that to you. I don't have that with me. It's not a low number, but certainly as Rick's CAFR presentation presented the other day, it's not as high as other communities.
Right.
But I'll have to, let's see if I can maybe get it in here.
While you're still on that slide, how does that compare to like the city of Wichita?
That I don't know. We would need to dig into that because this essentially takes. Could I recommend that maybe we do a Tuesday staff meeting on this, and I can show you
Sure.
the data behind this, and we can go into details
Sure.
on it.
I just find it interesting that we're comparing our government spending on what the personal income is for our residents, and if you can see what other communities are too,
Absolutely.
I think we'd all be. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Really. I'm
It
not
really
trying
is.
to scrutinize it. I never see anything like that.
And not that it really matters, but I think it would be interesting to do that calculation to find out how much more budget we would have just to equal that
Okay.
benchmark, if you will.
Happy to.
I don't think there's any way to get there. I don't think there's an appetite for that in our community. But it's a good discussion to have.
Okay.
Can I continue? I have another question.
As a
Yes, sir.
note, Rick does show that slide for his CAFR briefing, and also when we do the adopted budget in the summer, we also show that slide. So multiple times a year, we'll put that in front of you.
Okay. That's
And so
fine.
you add up all personal income for everybody, because obviously there's a lot of retired people, a lot of kids, and you do it off of
Right.
adult population or entire population?
Entire population.
Okay, so 500,000 people.
So it's based on income tax filings.
Right.
So, in
so
other
we
words,
can
our
go-
community's income tax filings is our
Right.
factor. Okay. On slide 20, we did make some changes in our transaction costs for debit and credit card transactions. I would like to have that broke out to find out. You mentioned that electronic transactions are going up and paper transactions are going down. That's a great change. I don't know how that has been impacted by our change in credit card and debit card fee charges. If there's a way to do draw a line in the sand on that policy change and say what was happening before that, maybe a trend line, and then here's the change, and then here's what happened after that, it'd be good data to look at. I would like to know. And by the way, I know we can't directly impact this. It's really out of our control, but I do think it ought to be on a legislative platform. We ought to start a list. It's that time of year. I think we need to talk to the state about they impose fees through our office as well as the driver's license office, but through our tag office, they set those fees. I just went and purchased a little vehicle a couple of days ago, and I was there, and I think I paid 4% or something like that on the costs. And it is way too high, and I think they need to be challenged. And especially if I just want to use an electronic form of payment, I could use a debit card. Why am I paying even at that office paying a percentage fee of the transaction cost? That doesn't make sense. It should be a set fee for that transaction, regardless of the cost. And so we need to challenge that. I'd like to see that on our legislative platform. The state needs to modernize this. This is, especially if you buy an expensive vehicle, this is a very, very expensive thing for taxpayers to have to deal with. We need to get that changed. And so just want to point that out. It should be on our platform, I think. Okay. Anyway, so if I can get that data from you, I'd appreciate that.
Happy to.
I think I have anything else here. On page 26, I see that those trend line, the bottom trend line, number of purchase orders created in SAP is significantly lower. Can you, on that 5-year trend line, what is happening there that's caused such a change in data?
Joe, do you want to talk about that?
Joe Thomas, Purchasing Director, sir. What we've been encouraging vendors to do, which lowers our administrative cost, and what our internal customers to do, is to create what's known as a blanket purchase order, either a semi-annual or annual expense for a particular vendor. And then as they receive invoices from that vendor, they can utilize one purchase order and make payments off the one purchase order. And that greatly reduces the cost we have administratively as opposed to producing individual purchase orders for individual invoices. So that's why we see the trend line of the purchase orders trending down.
Okay.
Does that explain, hopefully?
I think so, yeah. Is there anything else here? I think that's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But just for the record, do you want me to interrupt one of these presentations, or just wait till the end of like I am right now? Is what?
Joe.
If you want to interrupt in the middle, that's fine.
Okay.
You can get your question answered immediately.
Okay. All right. That's all. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Ranzau.
On that same slide, the response from DBEs has gone up quite a bit. Is there? I mean, that's good, but
That's real good.
How have we done that?
We have, Commissioner, conducted several outreach programs. We're involved with the City of Wichita, USD 259, Wichita State University. We have bi-monthly meetings where we share our database, vendor databases. We have, as you recently, I believe, attended, along with a member from the City Council, we have what's known as a mini procurement, where we invite minority, women-owned businesses to come and let them know how to do business with the county, encourage them to do business with the county. And so we have several outreach programs, which by the numbers shows has been very effective.
I knew we were doing those things, yeah, but I think maybe I haven't seen this before. This is the first time I've seen something, objective that shows that we're making progress, which I'm happy to see. So that's good. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions? Thank you. Seeing none, might go to the next item.
All right. Okay, Commissioners, so up next will be Community Development, and you should have a separate handout at your seats for that one.
Over 2017.
So the mission of community development overall is to promote the growth of a healthy and productive community that successfully integrates the natural, social, and economic environments. And so the ones you'll see today include Extension Council, Economic Development, Community Development Community Programs, Technical Education, and Wichita State University. So Extension is on page 571. This really is behind your Community Development tab in your binders. The Extension Council's mission is to be dedicated to a safe, competitive food and fiber system and to strong, healthy communities, families, and youth through integrated research, analyses, and education. Within their 2019 request, these are the services that they say they will fund. That includes offering a variety of services and educational programs. One of those is the Senior Health Insurance Counseling of Kansas event. In 2017, more than 3,200 seniors were able to get this service. Likewise, Extension reports that agriculture is the second largest industry in Sedgwick County, and they provide research-based information to assist producers to be more efficient and profitable. They also provide a home for the 4-H youth program, which provides more than 10,000 Sedgwick County youth with hands-on learning experiences for farming and animal husbandry. They also, of course, have the Master Gardener program, and just to put a plug in for them, of course, they keep the front of our courthouse looking great. Those volunteers contribute more than 19,000 hours across the community each year. K-State Research and Extension in Sedgwick County provide nutrition education to limited resource families. And finally, it serves as a community gathering spot for special events, including the farmers market. Their request is flat in 2019 with 2018 at $825,481. And just as a reminder, we essentially just write them a check each year. None of their staff are on our staffing table or anything like that.
Before you go on, let me stop there for a minute. I know that this is what we're doing, but there's an agreement between us and the Extension Center that I asked several months ago to review. I just want to know where we're at on that agreement.
They have had a draft of a new agreement that would allow them to keep the revenue. There's a small amount of revenue that they can generate from room rentals, and they have had the draft of that contract for a few weeks now. They tried to get it on their last council agenda. They have a board that reviews those contracts as well. Angela told me that they didn't get it done in their last meeting, and so I assume that they will take it up in their May meeting, and then we'll have it on the agenda for you soon after.
Good. I just hadn't heard anything about it, so I was trying to figure out where it was at. Commissioner?
They've had it for a while.
It's done. They're just waiting to approve it. It's about 34,000.
Somewhere in there.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be reminded. I think Commissioner Granzel might know this better than maybe all do know as well. But doesn't the Extension Council do kind of a shoebox election to appoint people that are controlling this money? How do they elect their board members to? Commissioner Peter John, when he was here, used to bring this up all the time. And I think this is the budget that has that. So I guess
unless something has changed, what he used to report is yes, there was that informal.
I think that again, I'm pleased that they are doing a great job, and so I'm not condemning anything that they're doing. I think they do a tremendous job. But there's a principle that's not being, I guess, preserved in this. There either ought to be appointments from elected officials, or there should be some type of a real election there. But to the extent they have almost $1 million in their budget, and something we ought to take a look at.
Okay.
if I understand correctly, it's really not an advertised. It's not an advertised election. It's more of a, I call it a shoebox election, and it's a loosey-goosey type of process. But they're spending almost $1 million. So I would like it if this would be something that there ought to be some elected official that makes appointments to this board or something. There ought to be a way to, since they actually have an authority to spend almost $1 million, it ought to be done in a way that I think is accountable to an elected official. And I don't think that we have that in place right now. So, yes, sir.
I could be wrong, but I mean, the election process, I thought, is dictated by state statute. And, I mean, it is advertised. It's just that it's at a time, people just don't know much about it, but people can apply for it. They do put it out and stuff, try to distribute it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of, big news to get out to the whole community. So I think there actually is a process. Not a lot of people vote in it, I think, or know about it, but I think we need to check into it. And I think it is dictated by state statute, but I could be wrong.
Well, perhaps
they are elected officials in that regard for that, anyway.
Well, perhaps we ought to get an understanding exactly, what the process is that is being followed and how many people vote in this process and who has oversight. I mean, the election commissioner doesn't run this election. So this is something that's done, I think, by somebody else. And so,
well, if you remember, she didn't show up for her extension report this last week, but she'll be here next week. So it is certainly something you can bring up with her next week.
We'll give her a heads up. We guess we'd like to get some data on that. And then I guess if we're following state law, that's great. I'm wondering if this is something we ought to
we need
consider.
to understand it, because if we're going to change it, I'd like to put that in that funding agreement as a thou shalt. So we need to figure that out before they do that. But she'll be here Wednesday.
We probably need to have legal to look at this just to make sure.
Right.
Because if I'm not mistaken, I thought Commissioner Peterjohn was wanting to amend the state statute to do a variety of things and fix things, but I don't remember the details.
Well, it's just an issue we probably ought to understand. I think it's up to us to make sure this is done correctly with that kind of spending. I didn't realize it was that much. But for the record, I received, I'm going to say maybe 100 emails from people who receive benefits through the SHIC program. They do a lot of great things there. And so I really, overall, I'm pleased that they have this resource in our community. They do great things. I'm not disappointed in that in any way. I just think that the election issue is something that was raised earlier, and I don't think we've ever solved it if it needs to be solved.
We just got an email from Ron Estes' office yesterday about it.
Yeah.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah, Roger Erickson from his office sent kudos
All right. Good.
On a Medicare.
on that training program that they do over there.
So yeah, overall, I'm very, very pleased with what they do. I just want to make sure we do. If there's an issue on the election side of this, we want to make sure we're doing whatever needs to be done there. If there's an issue.
Well, and the budget office had done an issue paper, a quite lengthy one a few years ago, I think prompted by Commissioner Peterjohn, and so we can try and find that information too and get that disseminated, because I do know there's a difference between extension councils and districts, to Commissioner Ransaw's point about what is controlled by statute and what's not, so we can clarify that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Shifting gears then a little bit, we'll look at economic development, which is on page 579. Again, this was part of a strategic plan initiative that we did in concert with the Deputy County Manager last year. So the new mission is to promote a strong and diverse regional economy by enhancing opportunities for businesses to retain or attract new jobs within the county. Programs include the evaluation of business expansion and retention projects in concert with our community partners, to do analysis of requests for supplemental funding for external agencies, to administer incentive agreements approved in prior years, and to support non-governmental business and economic development organizations. That budget by program looks like this. There's economic development administration, which occurs within the general fund, and most often when we talk about economic development, this is what we're referring to. That total budget in 2018 is about $1.9 million. It is $1.7 million in 2019. Again, just a reminder that we did shift $250,000 of budget authority from this program over to the community development or community program contingency that's new in 2019. But we also shifted a portion of Brent's position into this fund center, and so that's why you don't see that nice clean $250,000 difference. But I guess I can show it to you on this slide. So this is all programs together in one, showing the total amount of personnel, contractuals, and commodities. The bulk of this budget is within contractuals. We don't necessarily forecast to spend it all, but it is there as a resource. And again, it does reflect that shift of half of Brent's position to this program out of the CFO office, as well as shifting that $250,000 from contractuals here over to the contingency budget that we talked about earlier.
You want to go back a couple slides?
Absolutely.
Foreign trade zone, what do we do, $4,000 there?
We actually don't even spend that much money. It's essentially a pass-through account where we act. Sherdell Breathed actually in our office acts as a foreign trade zone administrator. And so anytime anyone wants to come here and take advantage of a duty-free zone, they're able to get engaged with him. They pay our fees, and then we pay that on behalf of the person who's paying it as the administrator of that program. And so if you look in your budget book, you'll actually see that our expenses from that fund center are pretty low from year to year. Other expenses include, though, his travel for conferences and such related to that administrator designation.
And the $40,000 for economic development grants, that looks like it's ongoing.
It is. It is ongoing. That is something where the county received a lump sum amount of funds from the state some years back to do essentially some home loans, or I'm sorry, not home loans, business loans, microloans. And so this is how that program is administered. And we actually are talking about making some changes to that program, and we likely will come to you with some recommendations before too long about whether to continue doing it in the fashion we're doing it or whether we need to make some adjustments.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we will shift gears to community development, community programs. Just a reminder that there are 3 sets of community program budgets. Within Sedgwick County, there's human services community programs, there's culture and recreation community programs, and there's this program, which is community development community programs. There are 2 entities that receive funds from this, the Wichita Transit Authority and for Oaklawn, to provide services there. And also the Mediation Center receives $8,000 per year. The Wichita Transit Authority provides that specialized transportation service. It provides access for more than 2,750 residents to get to employment, education, or other destinations. The Mediation Center, on the other hand, provides a service designed to resolve issues without the involvement of courts. And so essentially, for the most part, there are volunteer efforts of local attorneys to come together and try and help mediate things to keep them from coming to the district court, which of course then helps Sedgwick County quite a bit.
So the 2,750 residents, that's total that live there. How many use it?
Tim, do you have those stats? How many use the transit for Oaklawn?
I'll try and get that for you and get it to you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
And how much are we putting into that?
$34,795, I believe. $38,795, excuse me.
Okay. And I guess based on the number of users and the amount of cost, we need to find out how much we're subsidizing this thing for.
I think, if I recall correctly, it's a full
If we have
subsidy. They won't offer it if we don't pay for it.
We're putting out, or 400 riders, we're putting out almost $40,000. Why? We're subsidizing each rider quite a little bit.
And the ridership is down in part because of some changes that the city has made with their bus route. And if we did not offer this subsidy, I don't believe that there would be public transportation in that community. And that is, from my understanding, how that started and why it's been done in the past.
Okay.
And one of the things that they did
But if we're subsidizing each rider $1,000 or something, that's crazy.
I'll try and find out.
I just need to know where we're at. If we're subsidizing them $50, why maybe it.
You want to know the number, like how many distinctly different individual people use it.
Right.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck with it.
There's really no way to know that.
I mean,
They don't sign in when they get on the bus, and so.
It's hard getting accurate information from the transit as far as the number of individuals that use it on a basis, not just trips and stuff. So.
Well, even if we know
We
the
can talk about
total
that.
number that ride it in a year, we can then take that and figure it into how much that we're paying.
I think they'll give you trips,
Right.
which could be multiple trips for one person going from A to B.
I'll ask them, but I don't know that they'll be able
Right.
to define.
I need to speak to this. Yeah. May I? So, as you know, Oaklawn is not inside the city. If it was inside the city, they would provide the service automatically. The city has never wanted to annex the community of Oaklawn, and so it's a county community, and as such, the city doesn't really feel any, I guess, front-end desire to provide that transportation through that community. They do provide it through Plainview and Hilltop and other places in my district that are low income. Oaklawn, as you know, is a lot of folks live in Oaklawn, and they don't really have a way to get to work. So this is to them it's a great necessity. When this was just changed about a year ago, especially when trying to think exactly what happened, but there was a situation where they rerouted almost all of the bus lines, had new routes. As a consequence, they decided to stop running buses down Oliver through Spirit to the WATC had a training facility there at 47th Street in Oliver, and I guess that has since changed. I understand. I'm not quite sure about that, but nevertheless, the bus doesn't run there any longer, and so. The only reason they have to go to Oaklawn really is to pick up people going to work. They don't have any reason. They don't go to Oliver and 47th like they used to. And so this has been a subsidy. It is a subsidy. It's been in place for many, many years. They did reduce the rider. They did reduce the number of times it goes through the community. It's basically in the morning and the evening, ends of the work, beginning and end of the workday. But that community has, I think, a great dependence on public transportation, and so. I think our cost has actually gone down a little bit. It used to be a little higher than it is right now, if I understand correctly. But it is a subsidy, absolutely. But without that, those folks can't get to work, and that's kind of the point.
And
So
this came about 2 years ago when the city cut a lot of service across the city in order for budget savings, and this is one of those because of a gap that occurred. We kind of ponied up the ability to still provide a service, not to what it was, but
they also schedule trips specifically from the community to, let's say, Walmart. A couple, 2-3 times a week, they'll do that. They go from the community center to Walmart in Derby or whatever. They might go to Aldi or Dillon's or whatever to buy groceries. And so there's a lot of things this money does. It's not just a bus runs down the street. There's actually over the month, I think, a lot of effort to trying to get people connected to grocery stores and shopping that they need, as well as getting to work. And without this service, that community is going to be seriously struggling. So as you get that data on this ridership, please make sure you get the data on those special transportation vehicles as well. But I would really hate to see us, pull money out of this program. We're going to see a lot of people who can't get to work any other way. I don't know what they're going to do if this was to go away.
So you're saying that Oaklawn is more important than other areas in the county?
I'm
Because
saying
the
that
other
there's a lot
areas
of.
may require the same kind of subsidy then.
What I'm saying is this is a unique area. It's in the county. It's a very high populated area. It's very low income. There's places all around Wichita that have the same thing, but they're inside the city of Wichita, so they get that service automatically. It's done through the transportation system that Wichita provides automatically. This one's different because it's not inside the city.
There's a lot of places inside the city that are not covered by bus transportation.
Okay. Well, I went to the meetings, and I would tell you this is a pretty unique situation. I don't think there's any place else in the county that's like this one. And people can walk. If they don't have this, the nearest place to get to a bus would be they have to walk all the way to Hydraulic and 47th, which is for many of these folks, it's over a mile. Trying to carry bags of groceries and stuff, it's very, very difficult. And then
All I'm asking is how much subsidy we're providing to each rider.
I understand. I do think it's a little high, but they set the rate, and so either we do it at the rate they require, or we don't do it at all. It's one of those two things. So,
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell?
So it's open to anybody in Oaklawn.
yeah.
And that's the population of 2,750. that's in-
No, that's, well, that may even be the number of residents. You probably are correct about that.
Right. So, but we don't know if there's 100 people that do it. Back to what Commissioner Dennis is saying, we don't know if 1,000 people take advantage of it, and then it's, $3 or something a ride, or if it's
Correct.
2 people that take it. So, however we can get that, I think it's just interesting. I don't think any of us are advocating to take it away, but it is interesting. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
We'll be happy to get more details on that. Okay, looking over at technical education on page 588. This is one that requires a little bit of explanation, although we talked about it a bit Wednesday during the quarterly report. So this technical education budget represented about $904,000 that was paid out to WOTC, either as a direct allocation of support or for reimbursement of utilities paid or used by space that NIAR rented at the facility. In late 2017, though, the commission and leaders from WSU and WOTC met because of the affiliation agreement between Wichita State and WOTC that was going forward to create WSU Tech. And as a part of this, $800,000 of revenue from the Wichita State University 1.5 mils was paid to the county by WSU to help us offset our NCAT debt service per year. So that money was paid by WSU to the county. Then we in turn paid $900,000 to WOTC. As a result of the merger, that affiliation, WSU is no longer going to pay the county $800,000, and the county is no longer going to pay WOTC $900,000. Overall, the bottom line, as Commissioner Howell asked the other day, is that there's a $100,000 roughly net savings to the county as a result of this change. And so the budget goes from $904,000 in 2018, though we do not plan to pay that, and goes to $0 in 2019. So then looking at Wichita State University itself, that's on page 592 of your binders. Again, the county levies 1.5 mils countywide, and those proceeds go to WSU. This is what's reflected here is how they said they would spend those estimated revenues for the 2018 budget. We will be getting them the estimated amount of revenue we expect to collect in 2019, and we'll be asking them to prepare a budget for 2019, and that will be included in the recommended budget that Mike presents to you, but it will represent whatever the full 1.5% is. As a reminder, this budget always includes $300,000 of additional budget authority in case revenue collections are greater than anticipated. Because this is what's called a certified fund, we would have to readopt the entire budget if we happen to receive more money and didn't have a capacity to pay it to them. And so we just build in that contingency. It's not necessarily tied to real cash. It's just spending authority if we get more revenue than we need. Again, resulting from an increase in assessed value, we expect that those revenues to be paid to WSU will go up overall 2.2%. And again, that's not just straight ad valorem tax, that's also motor vehicle taxes and everything that's tied to that mill levy rate. There are no decision packages, alternative reductions, or revenue packages for any entity with community development. Overall, that budget has gone down significantly. You can see that that is largely because of that technical education elimination of funding, set off somewhat by slight increases for Wichita State University. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, or I'm done. And I know we have the next 3 presenters in the room, so I'm also happy to sit down.
In reality, we're spending over $11 million a year on current WSU, correct?
For WSU, it's this $8.3 million.
No, we're also paying $3-some million for debt service.
Oh, for
and
NCAT?
bonds. Right.
That amount, yes, roughly.
Yeah, 3.
More than,
Yeah.
just slightly in excess of $3 million per year for NCAT.
3.1.
Yeah. So it's a little over $11 million a year is going out to WSU in one form or the other.
Yes, sir.
Right.
But the
It's
city of
all-
Wichita claims half of that, though.
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of this, especially these slideshows, is on that budget card I sent you guys. So
All right, Lindsay, I see no questions. I'm
Okay.
amazed, but I see no questions.
I think we had our share. We're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Manager, what do we have next?
Okay, next we have the Treasurer's Office. We'll be on page 103 of your binders. I'll turn it over to Linda Kazar when she's ready.
I mean, I'm serious. They say that we get 4 million, they get 4 million. No fight
Morning, Linda.
Morning, how are you?
How you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
Good.
Good.
You ready?
Yes, sir, I am. Are you ready? Good morning, Commissioners. Linda Kazire, Sedgwick County Treasurer. I'll be short and sweet, like I always am. You know, the Treasurer's Office, our mission is, of course, to provide honest, friendly service to and being accountable to the citizens of Sedgwick County through the timely collection of our tax payments coming in, distributions, and dealing with public funds. We're going to be talking about the tax office today, which we bill, distribute, collect real estate, personal property, motor vehicle, commercial vehicle, special assessments, and other miscellaneous taxes to the 107 taxing authorities in the county. That includes the cemetery districts, the library districts, the water management districts, fire, etc. The day-to-day collection operation is done by just internal staff, clerks, and accountants. Other internal work that we use, we have a few bills that we do have still done at the print shop, and the majority of our outside mailing is done by an outside vendor. We also offer a prepayment program for people that are on a fixed income that just cannot come up with all the money at 2 times a year, and we administer that to over 4,000 people in Sedgwick County. Our budget's pretty easy. We're just asking for our personnel, obviously, some contractual money, and some commodities. The 3.97% increase was due to the salary increases from the, what did they call that? The reclassification of staff, and then the raise at the end of the year, or the beginning of this year, pardon me. So as you can see, the bulk of our budget does go to personnel. Our contractuals and commodities, of course, we've got to pay to print the bills. We have postage costs incurred. We have contractual agreements for various vendors for our copiers and remittance processor. We run our checks through a remittance processor. Then we upload the files electronically to the bank rather than the checks being hand carried over there. And we also have armored car service, of course, to bring us money and to take our cash deposits. And sometimes they're very significant. That's why we have to have an armored car service. We're asking for no decision package, no alternative reduction, and no revenue package requests. So, questions?
Good. How are we doing on kiosks?
I have a meeting Monday on those. As a matter of fact, I do. Matt from Kansas Department of Revenue is coming down, and Nolan Jones, who is on the Information Network of Kansas Board.
Good. I look forward to it.
Okay, I'll catch up with you Monday afternoon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. And something that isn't included in here, but what was the budget transfer that you gave us at the end of the year? Do you remember?
It was around $500,000.
And do you project something similar to that?
I honestly cannot project that far out. Right now, as Rick presented the other day, motor vehicle taxes are lower than they were this time last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's because of people waiting longer to pay. I don't know if it's they're not buying newer cars. I'm watching that revenue very closely.
Sure. But I know that you're a fee-funded agency,
correct, for TAG.
And
Mm-hmm.
but there is a big economic benefit to the county that people don't think about when they look at your budget overall.
Mm-hmm.
They see this expense, but they don't realize how much money you bring in, and then at the end of the year, even though it's discretionary money, you could spend that on tag-related services.
Correct.
Or in those departments, you choose to give the taxpayers back hundreds of thousands of dollars
Correct.
annually.
Yes,
that's
sir.
not accounted for in this budget.
No, sir.
So, right.
So 2016, she gave us 509,000. For 2017, it was 434,000.
Yeah.
Right now, she's probably on track for a little bit less than that.
Yeah, but still, that's substantial dollars. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Howell?
Just thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to make sure I'm understanding, each one of these presentations may be done differently. Does this one include a pay increase? There's a 4% increase in personnel costs. What is that? Just because we're adding some people, or what's going on there?
I didn't add any people.
I
Okay.
think that's mainly due, you saw a reclassification for the manager
Okay.
position from a bookkeeper.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That explains that.
That would have been for tag. This is strictly tax.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood that. You're right about that. So, anyway, I just want to find consistency from each one of these presentations. I want to know if whether this includes the salary increases. So, what's the 4% increase for?
It's likely related to turnover and those benefits, like what we saw in purchasing, where we had 2 employees come on. The old employees had single coverage. One employee came on with 2 person, another person came on with family, and so that was about a $10,000 increase per $6,000 and $10,000 increase per person that the county had to pay on behalf of those employees. And so, to the extent there's turnover, that's likely the result is different benefit selection, since pay is essentially flat.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions? I don't see any. You do a great job of collecting taxes. I can speak from personal experience.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Jim, how was your experience on Tuesday? Was it good?
You know, I actually filled out a card there. The person there was extremely friendly. I was there, I think, on Tuesday. Did title work. I was in and out in 10 minutes. And
Wonderful.
I just thought, I mean, couldn't be any better. And I know it's busy at the end of the month, but when I went in a couple days ago, it was glory. I'll just say that. The office is wonderful. And my only negative thing would be I like to clean up the door that goes to the highway patrol. Looks a little less than professional on that door. But other than that, your office is great. So
Thank you. Did you use Culus?
I did, but I couldn't. The problem was it happened so fast I couldn't get there quick enough, and I was
Oh,
kicked
okay.
back
I
off.
just wanted to make sure because we like Culus.
Yeah, I love Culus, but the only problem is I can't get there quick enough, and so it's a good problem to have.
Well, at the end of the month, you won't have that good luck with Culus.
I had someone just this morning tell me that they used it at the end of last month, and they said that they had a 30-minute wait, and they were able to go out and do some things while they were waiting. And it said it was just wonderful. That's one of the best additions we made, I think,
Yeah,
in
it
customer
is.
service to the community. No one likes to go. No offense to you, but no one likes to go to the tag office.
I know.
It's a drag to have to go there, but when you do go, it would make it as good of an experience as possible. So that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, while I got you there, one thing I learned from Senator Peterson the other day is that if you've got a veterans tag, that you can get whatever branch of the service decal is and put it on your tag for $2.
It's just a small.
And unfortunately,
Put it
it's you got to be within about 2 feet to read it.
You should still spend the money.
What?
Well, I did.
Well, he did.
I bought it for all my vehicles, but one thing, you're going to a different type of tag that they now print rather than as embossed.
That's-
Would it require us to put it on a legislative agenda or something to have the new veterans tags where that they can actually put our crest of the military service on the veterans tags?
That would be a legislative change. I think you would get good reception to do so. It would be very possible with us going to the digital plates starting August 1st of this year.
We do what?
If you promote Army and make it done faster.
That's the problem is you guys in the Army would just look down at your nose at the Air Force guys. So I don't think we ought to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mr. Dennis told me if we could just get the Air Force to get their own plate, he'd be happy. So I don't know. I think Richard and Mike might disagree with that, but
On Monday, we'll have Matt come up and
Yeah.
talk to Commissioner Dennis.
Okay.
And I'm
And-
sure he'd be happy to meet with them about that.
Okay.
Matt's the Chief of Staff
Yeah.
for the Department of Revenue.
If they can start printing the tags and put special things on there like what your branch of the service is so you can actually see it, I think that'd be fantastic.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll work on it.
We'll bring him up, talk
Yeah.
about kiosk and talk about that on Monday.
Okay.
Good.
We'll do that.
All right.
Alrighty. Thank you guys. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
And we will get one for the Army.
In that order, though, right?
Air Force and another.
It's alphabetical. Air.
Just so you know, only the Army and Navy are actually specified within the Constitution, so I think we have standing.
That's right. That's right. You're here.
Good morning, Tanya.
Good morning.
I
How are
think
you?
I think the Army gave birth to the Air Force, right?
Army Air Corps, I still.
That's right.
All right, Lorian, call him back.
Next, we have the Register of Deeds. Will be on page 43, and Tanya Buckingham is here to present.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Tanya Buckingham, Register of Deeds, and I'm happy to be here to present the budget. To start with, our mission is to preserve the accuracy of public land records so that the public and businesses who work with these records can obtain them accurately and timely. On this next screen, it shows the services that we offer. We record real estate documents, we record plat maps, we preserve the real estate documents, we process documents, verification, we do redaction to protect the Sedgwick County citizens from exposure of personal information. We also file the DD-214s, which is the military discharges, and we make those available for free for the veterans for copies. On this next slide, you can see where there is a slight decrease in our mortgages and our documents, but there's a huge increase in the electronic filing. And that is due to some of the title companies that are now going 100% e-recording. So that's really exciting. The budget request for registered deeds is $1.178714 million. Our contractuals and commodities are estimated next year to be the same as this year. And that is the end of my budget. Pretty quick. I'll stand for questions.
Question.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you. What's the process to get that DD Form 214 filed? Is it just bring in a copy, or?
Yeah, just bring in the original, and there's some stamps that go
I'm not sure
on
I
it.
have an
and-
original because all I have is copies. I don't think. How do you get an original?
Well, you can go to the VA, the Veterans
Okay.
Administration, and get that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And then just bring it in and you'll file it?
Yeah, we
And-
file it, and then we give you back, usually it's just about 5 copies, and we do that for free.
That's awesome.
It doesn't take that long.
When you discharged or transitioned out, I should have given you a hard copy of the DD-214.
Well, I have again, this has been a little while back, so it's all old technology. So I was given a paper copy, but is that what you're talking about?
No, they should have given you a hard copy with wet signatures on it.
Interesting. Well, I'll go to the VA and get that worked out. So
Okay. All right.
that's good to know that you guys can do that. I'll say you guys do a great job in your office. Appreciate
We
all
try
you do.
to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
While you're on the DD-214, I honestly didn't file mine for about 20 years after I retired because I was afraid that it was going to be a public record if you put it in the Register of Deeds office. But it is not a public record. It is only available to you or to your next of kin later on if they have a need for it. So I want to make sure it
Or
is.
your house burns down.
Yeah.
So
Put it on file.
if your house burns down, there is a record up here.
Right.
So it's something good to do.
It is.
After I learned, actually after Ms. Buckingham came out and spoke to my Citizens Advisory Board, I learned more about it and how safe it was, and so I did file mine. But,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that all the veterans know that it is an option that is secure.
Yes.
I have a question along that line.
Very good.
Yeah, I actually filed mine a long time ago when my first one when I got out of basic training AIT. But my question for you is,
Okay.
like I filed one that long ago. How do you, if I come in and say I need a copy of it, how do you find that?
How do we find that?
Yeah, I mean, can you find?
Yeah, we have the records, and they're scanned into the system, and we can pull it up and make you a copy of that.
Electronically?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
even if you don't know the date that. Okay.
Yeah, we have it like we would look it up by Richard Ranzall, and then maybe if you could if you know the date that it was, maybe you were discharged. So it's really simple. Yeah.
And they give you a nice folder for it, a little envelope, put yours in, they give you one back, and it'll tell you what drawer and so forth. I don't remember how it's filed, but it tells you where you can file it after you get it, or find it after you get it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm wondering. I'll have to come down and see.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah,
amazing
just
because
come
this
down.
was back in the 80s when I would have
Yeah.
done it, and
Well, these are all the way back to the 1940s that are
Yeah.
filed. Yeah, we have all of them. Okay.
Commissioner-
Then on Veterans Day, you can get the discount if you go around the restaurants and show them a little card. I understand. I've never done that before.
I
But,
don't know about that.
all right.
On Veterans Day, most places you can get free lunch. So there is a free lunch.
All right. Very good.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and sharing all this with us, Tanya. I appreciate your office continuing to be innovative. I know that a lot of the procedures were antiquated, and you're continuing to find new ways, like most recently the home identification.
Yeah, the property activity alert.
Yes, the property
Yes,
activity
yeah.
alerts and stuff. And I just wanted to thank you for going through and helping us with records disposal, too. I know that there were, going back decades, if not almost 100 years, some of the records that you're
Yes.
helping us get rid of, and just
Yeah.
want to encourage more of that, because it seems like we've been holding on to stuff.
We have things that we
a
really
lot.
don't need to hold
Right.
on to that
'Cause
we're
if it's
kind
not-
of cleaning up.
Right, because if it's not defined by state statute that we should keep records after a number of years, it makes no sense for us to be
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
paying for that storage. And I know you've taken an initiative on that, so I just wanted to
Oh,
thank you for that, because that
thank
helps
you.
our budget in other areas
Yeah.
by not paying for
All right.
useless storage,
Yes.
which we obviously have been doing.
Yeah.
So
We have about 4,000 books that are at the salt mine right now that are being stored because we don't have the room to keep them here in the office.
Right.
So when we went to the 4th floor to the 2nd floor, and our vault area was a lot smaller, we had to send those books to the salt mine. Yeah.
and getting rid of some of those
Yeah.
too if they're not
Yeah.
by state law.
Yeah.
So whatever we can do to encourage you to
Yeah.
help with that, that'll alleviate budget
Yeah.
constraints in other areas.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys not shredding the register deeds too.
Oh, that was.
Yeah, that was nice.
You can thank our friends in the legal department for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you. Any other questions? All
I
right.
don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, y'all have a good day.
You too.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, we know you have an appointment at 11:30, so this will be our last presentation today. It's from the District Attorney. It'll be on page 291, and we'll hand it over to Mark Bennett.
Good morning, Mr. DA.
Good morning. All right. Let me know when you're ready. Guys ready?
Okay.
Okay. Let's see if I do this right. There we go. So, give you a quick mission statement. We'll talk a little bit about the presentation today, 3 decision packages. We'll talk a little bit about crime trends and projections. Excuse me. I believe it's helpful for the BOCC in preparing for the future to have a sense of what's going on in public safety in the community, what we're dealing with. Talk about some of the issues that we're attending to, most of which have to do, or a lot of which have to do, separate and apart from crime trends, but have to do with digital advancements that are affecting the practice of law and the management of the criminal justice system in Kansas. And talk finally, just very briefly, about attorney salary adjustments, enhancements took place last year, and the study we're asking to be conducted to make sure we're keeping pace. And I'll tell you a little about that. I think you all know the makeup of the District Attorney's Office. Gave a quick overview there, the number of divisions within the office and the work that we do in each of those divisions. Obviously, if you have any questions, let me know. But just to make good use of everyone's time, I'll go through that. Then we go straight to the slide 5 of the budget request. Got a couple of JAG grants that are noted there. One is for a sort of start a theme we'll talk about throughout my presentation. The first one is the $30,000. It has to do with an interface with
software that we're going to have to interact with. Second one has to do with trying to update some of our media within the office. When officers come over and present cases to us, especially the homicides and the more serious cases, we ask them to bring evidence with them. And what we'll typically do is something akin to this. They'll bring over a lot of times in a PowerPoint or some other digital media. They'll show us surveillance tapes. They'll show us Axon body cameras. They'll show us photos of a crime scene, etc. We have to have some mechanism to view this. And I think it's safe to say that the last update to that room and that media was some time ago. And the other day we had to shut it down because there was a problem with it. It wasn't working at all. So just those are the only two grants we have hanging out at this time. Budget request set forth there on the sixth slide. I can answer any questions, but self-evident. I was going to spend most of my time talking about the three decision packages, but if you have any questions, if not, I'll move on. Number 7, this is where we get to the decision packages. So there's 3: a case coordinator, a technology support developer, and an office assistant. I'll start with the case coordinator. That's a distinction or a description we use to describe the people who are basically our liaisons to the public. If you've come into our office on the second floor, just below, you walk in and immediately there's an anteroom there with a receptionist. And immediately to your left is a room that's where our case coordinators are at. They're the ones who get subpoenas, make sure they're out, make sure that they are interacting with the witnesses, with our attorneys to figure out which witnesses we need. We're trying to save people time. Just this morning, I was just left. A couple of my attorneys are still down arguing motions in the Sesmas case. The woman who was accused of shooting Laura Barca and killing her, taking her child to Dallas. I remember that from November of 16. I mention that only because this morning we have 3 witnesses, one of whom is a Dallas cop. We had to get him brought up here, and these are the people who make that happen and get our witnesses here on time. And as I was asked the question, I think by Assistant County Manager Mr. Stoltz during my presentation to the managers or to the manager's command staff, I started working here in 1997, so this is 21 years I've been in this office. And my memory is we have the same number of case coordinators that we did when I started. Now we have added somebody to basically answer the window for people walking up, and we've added somebody to help identify basically just all the restitution and interact with the banks and interact with insurance companies and figure out how much restitution. But in terms of the workaday, making sure subpoenas are issued, making sure witnesses are contacted, making sure we have current information, cell numbers and email numbers and ways to contact families, some of which are out of state, we still have the same core group of 4 people doing that job. During that period of time, however, it's 21 years, much more is being expected of those folks, and not the least of which is the number of hearings. We had a bill passed by the Kansas legislature, I want to say 3 years ago now, House Bill 2170, which was an effort to reduce costs with the Kansas Department of Corrections. Essentially putting more steps in place between the time of conviction and the time of incarceration for nonviolent offenses. We, in a nutshell, now before we can send somebody to the penitentiary who has a very low criminal history and has committed a nonviolent offense, they have to be given multiple opportunities at probation. First of all, the judge gives discretion to the probation officers in those situations to have graduated sanctions for violations, so they can make them do community service or spend a night in jail or something if they have we call it a hot UA. By that I mean a positive urinalysis test. Then, though, there's a point at which if there may be a more serious violation, it goes to the judge. And when I started here, there were what I guess now would be considered old school judges who would tell, I heard this more than once, if I see you again, bring a toothbrush. That was a way of expressing that if you come before me on a probation violation, you're gone. Don't be a second chance. Well, that is not an option anymore under the law. The judge has to give them these chances, including the kind of the colloquialism has become a quick soak or a quick dip. That's literally what we call it, and it's basically somebody has to go in for either 30 or 60 or 90-day sort of shock treatment, go to jail, and hopefully that changes their behavior. So that's the rationale, and it keeps people from going directly to the penitentiary, and it keeps the DOC's costs down and helps the state. In the interim, however, there is a consequence to those of us working in the local jurisdictions, and that is that we have more hearings. What used to be, you'd go to get your probation, you go to a judge, you get sentenced, placed on probation. If you messed up, you were very likely to go to the penitentiary and be done. Now that doesn't happen, and we have exponentially more hearings each time. Couple that with State versus Dupree, which is a decision from the United States or from the Kansas Supreme Court, which clarified again and in more emphatic and unequivocal terms than ever before that a defendant has a right to not only be present but to object to continuances. There are a lot of times in the early stages, well, for the first 20 years of my career, defense attorney comes in and says, I'm in trial next week. I'm in trial on another case. My client here is in trial as well. I have to try case A, and case B will have to be continued. And the judge will say, okay, that's it. And they didn't ask the defendant necessarily in case B because it was clear the defense counsel was unavailable. Well, now under Dupree, we have to bring them in, and the defendant himself has a right to object, which adds more hearings, number one, but it also does one other thing for my case coordinators, and that is this. We have an obligation to tell victims of crime anytime there's going to be a hearing in which the defendant appears. And so each one of these hearings that takes place, these quick dips, these quick soaks, these more hearings for the defendant to be present to say, do you agree or not agree to the continuance? Each one of these things, which seems pro forma and seems just like a formality, may be legally, but the consequence on my office is we have to have more and more hearings, and we have to notify the public of each one of those. And by the public, I mean the victims, the witnesses, people. You need to be here. You don't need to be here. Last year, I think we had, I want to say, 31,000 hearings set, and that was just sentencing. Or excuse me, that didn't include every hearing that we do. That's prelims, bench trials, jury trials, etc. Now, that is not to suggest we had 31,000 separate hearings that took place, but they were set, and someone had to look at it, find out, is that going to go? Is it not going to go? Do I need to tell the victim? And so I have 4 very dedicated staff members doing that, but it is getting to the point that the burden on them is I candidly, there's times I can't believe they keep coming to work. The amount of work we expect them to do is breathtaking, and they are some of the most committed people you've ever met. They really take their job seriously, and they want to do right by these victims, and they make a connection with them, and they make sure that they know to be here, because these folks have a under the Kansas constitutional right to be present and see what's going on in their case. So that's the long story for the short situation, which is we need another hand, and I think after 20 years, it's probably time to do that. I'm going to jump past this one because this was a little more complicated. We'll go to number 3, and then I'll jump back to 2 if that's all right. 3 is an office assistant. This is going to be somebody on a support staff. What we have done over the years, rather than come back and asking for more folks, is to try to reassign. Let's have one person who does journal entries in the morning. Let's see if we can cross-train her to do expungements in the afternoon rather than hire a new person. And we have basically over the years tried to accommodate that by being more being more efficient, but it has left us spread fairly thin. And we have also had to, over the years, I won't say steal from Peter to pay Paul, but we have moved folks around within our sort of corporate structure, as it may be. By that I mean we've sent people to the Child Needed Care Division, for instance, when we've had large numbers of cases down there. The bottom line is when we have somebody on sick leave or somebody who takes another job elsewhere, we have had a hard time keeping up with some of our support staff responsibilities, and there are more and more tasks and responsibilities every day. I'll get back to this in a moment and reference this again with a further discussion that has to do with e-filing and the effect that's having on the office. But that is, and I should clarify, I guess I assume everybody knows what I mean, e-filing. For time immemorial, when a pleading was generated, a complaint information is filed, a sentencing journal entry is generated, a probation violation journal entry is generated, anything that an attorney will generate or a judge will sign an order, anything like that, any paper that is circulated for signature, and then we would take it to the clerk's office and it would be physically handed to them. They would clock it in and it would be filed in that manner. And you would see over the years in the courthouse any number of young people running around with stacks of paper in their hands. Those were the runners for all the law firms in town who would send the young person to the courthouse and do that task. Well, now we have e-filing, which means every attorney in the state has to file everything electronically. In fact, as I sat down here, totally coincidentally, I got an email from the Supreme Court finalizing the mandate that you cannot practice law in Kansas now unless you e-file. And so that's okay, great. That's an edict, which we have to comply with. But what may seem, well, you just push a button and send it on. It's not that simple. Now for something that simple, it takes a lot more manpower below. And I can, if you want to get it granular with it, I can tell you all the details, but the bottom line is that has taken a lot of our support staff's time to attend to that responsibility. And so bottom line is we could really use some help in our support staff, and that's the reason. Those are the reasons why. Going back, then to number 2 is the what's called a technology support developer. And a few years ago, when I first took office, I was talking to staff and about our needs and looking forward 4 or 5 years and what could we really use. And we came to the BOCC, I think 3 years ago, and asked for a technology support person because we felt that if we had somebody on staff, we could certainly utilize them. Well, we now wonder how we ever got along without them, and here's why, just to give you a quick idea of some of the work that he has done for us. Going back to e-filing, when a pleading is filed, just yesterday I signed a document for an inquisition to be opened, which is a mechanism by which we can issue subpoenas before a case is on file. We're still in the investigative stage, but a lot of things, medical records, for instance, cell phone records, they will not respond to a request over the phone. You have to send them a subpoena. Well, if I don't have a case on file, you can't issue a subpoena. The state statute allows an inquisition to be opened. It's kind of an unfortunate name, but it's a pretty innocuous event, which simply means by an affidavit being signed by a detective, we take it to a judge. He says, yeah, this is a legitimate investigation. And we send a subpoena to see if there's something, bank records, something like that. That simple deal. I said, yes, I approve this, send it on, judge signed it, we're done. Subpoena was issued. This morning, I have, I think, 8 emails in my inbox related to that filing, notifying me that it was filed, that the subpoena was filed, that the judge approved it, that the thing went out, and then it was, to the tune of last year, about 750,000 emails came into our office as a result of e-filing. Well, I have 150 emails in my inbox most days anyway. This only adds to the bulk, which, okay, it's inconvenient, big deal, get over it. Here's the problem. Some of these things we are required to maintain records of filings. This is now the recordation of the fact that the pleading was on file, and we have an obligation statutorily to maintain some of these things. And so we either have a human being sit there and read through 750,000, this is no exaggeration, 750,000 emails during the course of a year, which we have been doing, and that sucks people away from other tasks. So we put Peter, our technology developer that you all allowed us to hire a couple of years ago, to this task, and he is currently working on a mechanism to cull from that deluge of emails and figure out what we actually need, get rid of the rest, and so we can comply with our statutory obligation. I am utterly incapable of doing that on my own with a computer, and other than just to read the thing, and you have to have a software background to know how to do that. That's one of the tasks he's doing, just one. The sync portal is something else he's working on, which is every case in the sync system that comes in, there's literally a portal where information is shared with the parties in the courts, and it comes in en masse, sometimes from DCF, and he is working on a way to streamline that information, identify what parts we need, and goes to each individual case. And I'm I'm trying to strike a balance here because I can get pretty granular pretty quick and sort of bury you with information. I don't want to do that, but I'm trying to hit the high points here. So at any point you have a question, raise your hand, but I'm going to try to not put you to sleep. But, one of the other things we're trying to do here is, as I'm listening to presentations of Linda's and Ms. Buckingham's, it occurs to me that what happens in one division within the county system has impacts on others. So, for instance, the Forensic Science Center has a turnaround time for ballistics and for drug tests. So a guy gets caught with methamphetamine this evening. How quickly can we find out and confirm that that powder is indeed methamphetamine? Well, right now, we're at a 6-month turnaround, sometimes more. That means a case can't be filed for that period of time. I talked to Tim Roig and say, what can we do to help you in that regard? Because we're the ones, it's the WPD and the SO, but ultimately it comes back to me. What can I do to help you? And that's one of the things that Peter, my technology guy, is working on. Trying to identify cases that may be in a position to be pled. Maybe we can charge it on a field test. And if the guy will plead up front, I need to let Rory's folks know, you don't need to test that anymore. The guy's accepted responsibility. He is not. There's no argument. It was meth. He knows it was meth. And if we can do that, we're trying to figure out a mechanism where the WPD, the SO, and my office can communicate with the Forensic Science Center to say, stand down. You don't need to test that. We've already charged the burglary that he did, and the meth that was in his pocket, he's going to plead to that. Don't test that. But these are the kinds of things that a technology guy can do. We work with our RMS, hopefully the cities, and the counties, and these are the types of things that Peter's spending his time working on. Those are just some of the high points, but then come to here. That's what he's done in the past and is continuing to do right now. So why do we need another one? Why do we need a second guy? Well, we look at the thing, at the slide in front of you. We've got the e-filing mandate. As I said, 750,000 emails being generated. That is his new task, is to try to figure out how we can streamline that and make that more efficient so that we do not have to come back and spend human resources on that and have 2 or 3 people devoted to just doing that. If we can figure out a way to technologically address that, it would save all of us a lot of money and help us work more efficiently. The full court replacement. The court system in the 18th Judicial District and across the state has been, if you go to the clerk's office and ask to see the open complaint information in a given case, in one of my criminal cases, they'll be able to do that. And the mechanism they do it, you'll be given access to at one of the computers. They'll pull it up for you. Is Full Court. That's the software package. That's the software platform that the state uses for its court system. It was time to update that. It was like any software. It gets antiquated after a period of time. And this, 2 years ago maybe, we understood that they were going to update it. We all crossed our fingers and hoped that they would simply go with the latest version of Full Court. The reason being, we have developed, it took us a year or more to develop all these interfaces with the existing platform, Full Court. And we have those bridges are built across the digital highway, so to speak. And to start with a brand new software platform, we would have to rebuild all those bridges, rebuild all those interfaces. So we all held out hope that it would simply be Full Court Point 2, or whatever it would be called. And we were notified that that's not what happened. They went with an entirely different software developer, Tyler Technology, which the state, the court system is free to do. But as a result, we are now going to be in a position of having to redo all those interfaces with a new company and a new platform. Until very recently, we had zero indication that Tyler Technologies was going to afford or offer any support in that endeavor. That would be left to the individual agencies like my office to build our own interfaces with them. We are getting some indication there will be some assistance, but we'll still need somebody, even if they offer to do more than we. I don't know what they're going to do, but we're going to need somebody on our end to be the project lead to make that happen. Otherwise, our system will not speak to the state's computer system. Commissioner Dennis and I have attended several meetings with the county manager, assistant county managers, Stoltz and Leeds, with the city, discussing the possibility of a universal RMS system that would interface with the sheriff's JMS and Laura's emergency communications CAD system. But as I've said before, my system's going to be different because there is no platform right now that's going to be universal that also covers a prosecutorial function. So we're always going to have interfaces with the new RMS system from the county as well as with the states imposing upon us. So this is going to be, I'm going to need somebody to help us in this process. And that final or third rather bullet point, that interagency data sharing, that's the conversation I was just having, talking about the effort, the ongoing effort to interact with the city to see if we can't get all on the same sheet of music in terms of an RMS record management system, so that so much less data entry could take place. The cop in the street interacts with the individual, uploads their data. If they're taken to the jail, data is uploaded there, and there it is. As it stands now, data has to be re-uploaded by my office. Might have to be re-uploaded by the Forensic Science Center. It's just, we ought to be able to do this in a holistic sense. So that's again, trying to not overwhelm you with information, but those are the reasons for what I'm going to have to attend to. The bottom line is e-filing, the new RMS system from the state court system, the ongoing effort to interact and have a holistic RMS system within Sedgwick County. All of these things are great, but I still have to keep the lights on Monday morning and interact with them and get people to court on time and get filings done on time and comply with my statutory obligations and the obligations imposed upon us by the court system. So, moving toward the future, and this also, I think, informs decisions about the present. Let's talk about crime trends. You can see here, in this first slide, number 12, this is from the KBI, and all this information will flow from that. So just the chart since 2006, so over the last, that's a 10-year look. Lots of ups and downs, but unfortunately right at the moment, that's still 2 years ago, we're trending upwards on crime. Property crime offenses. The murders and the high profile cases are the ones that make the paper and drive a lot of discussion, but the reality is property crimes are still, by volume, the thing that impact our citizens most frequently. Garage burglaries, home burglaries, car burglaries, thefts, and things like that. And we need law enforcement agents and officers and prosecutors to attend to these trends. Violent crimes. Obviously, this is no surprise if you pay attention to national trends on slide 14. This is in keeping with what we're seeing nationally. A lot of crimes, some crimes are staying stable, but for some reason what the FBI identifies as their 4 major criteria, you'll see a slide momentarily that reflects what's going on in the city, which affects me. That's 85% of my cases comes from the city of Wichita. What they call the Part 1 offenses. We're talking rapes, homicides, assaults, and robberies. And here we are, violent crime, the rate of per 1,000 in the population. This is where we're at today. I've got I'll jump ahead momentarily here digress and give you my thoughts, at least, on what's driving some of this, and I'll support them as I wrap up. But we see these sort of things and you go, okay, well, what can we do about this? I mean, I know you need more people and need help, but what are we doing as a community, and what does the Board of County Commission or the City Council or the legislature, for that matter, need to do to attend to this? Is this just something we have to accept? And I would suggest to you, and I'll give you my reasons why in more detail here momentarily, but what I'm seeing as the commonality is the rampant use and the negative effect it's having of methamphetamine in this community. And if you go back when things were pretty high in the early 2000s, there was a pretty steady decline. And I would say, I'm not going to attribute it to, because I don't have a study to back me up here. I just have 20 years of experience in this office. But what was going on back then and what changed? Well, one of the things that changed, if you are an allergy sufferer, and I don't mean to be trite, but if you're an allergy sufferer, you'll remember around that time you had to go sign your name and put up a driver's license to get Sudafed, because they put it behind the counter because they were trying to stop all the meth labs. And I can tell you I spent countless nights in the early 2000s doing search warrants for meth labs. We had, I want to say 700, I think, statewide was the high in the early 2000s, and then they literally dropped off the face of the earth. We were doing none for a few years. I mean, there's an anecdotal here or there. Because the Sudafed was behind the counter, there weren't any cooks anymore. What's happened the last couple of years? Well, again, not to be glib here, but the private industry has stepped up, and the private industry meaning the cartels. And our meth is now coming from Mexico, and it's coming en masse. And it's everywhere, and it's cheap, and so that's one of the things going on. My personal opinion, based on what I'm seeing and talking to the cops and talking to my prosecutors and looking at statistics within our office, is that's what was happening then. It dove, and now it's on the rise again. Homicides, violent deaths. Again, if you sat in my office and went through the felony reviews with me that we do, that's what we call the presentations when the detectives bring the case over and say, here's the homicide, here's what's happened. There are some domestic violence cases where there's just an emotional reaction between two people, and then somebody, based on an emotional connection, gets upset, and that happens occasionally. There's always the robberies that occur and somebody dies during the course of. But again, what I'm seeing in terms of time after time is people who are making incredibly bad decisions based in large part on the use and abuse of drugs, and methamphetamine being chief among them. People absolutely zoned out on meth when they get into arguments and they shoot each other. Hey, don't talk to me that way. Oh, yeah? Boom. I mean, that was one case presented to me last week. No, I mean, 1 + 1 = 50. I mean, a punch to the face would have been what you would have expected under this situation. Instead, everybody's high on meth, and they shot the guy. Then we can try to gather up all the witnesses and figure out somebody who's still got a few marbles bouncing around in their head that can tell us what happened. I mean, it's a mess. I'm not trying to blame everything on this, but I'm not seeing anything else that is a common link between all of these slides other than this issue. So
what do we do about it?
Well, then there's some of the issue. One of the things you'll note, and I think I'm open to suggestions, but one of the problems we have in this community is a lack of consistent and accessible access to treatment. And that's not unique to Wichita or Sedgwick County. If they go around the country, there's not a business model for running a drug treatment facility for people who have neither the means to pay for it nor insurance through any sort of gainful employment. I don't think any of us want to go invest in that business as a private individual or as an equity firm saying we're gonna venture capital the new methamphetamine treatment program in Wichita because we think that's a going concern. We could make some money at this. That ain't gonna happen. And so I think at some point we have to make a decision about whether we seek grants, whether there's a community-based effort, maybe between, and I understand that a statement like this is fraught with implications, but the city council and the county commission may be getting together. We do have I can say this, we have ComCare, okay? And it is the benefit that ComCare provides to this community and collaterally to my office and law enforcement is staggering. A few years ago, before they started the crisis center, for instance, I came to you all and was showing you my care and treatment cases, the people who are a danger to themselves or others, and how that was just skyrocketing. The number of cases going up from 200 and 300, 400, 500. I was on a pace to hit about 1,000, and we had to put a person in place to attend to those. The only thing that changed was the crisis center, and the fact that cops now have a place to put these people other than in jail, and my numbers plateaued. They leveled off. The only change in this community was that. So by spending money in the crisis center, and then I'm sure you've seen the numbers, the Wichita State's Hugo Wall Center has done a comparative study, cost-benefit analysis for having that. For every, I don't know if it's for every $1 million, but by having that there, it has saved the community somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $7 million. And that's also including the hospitals and all the other people who the sheriff and incarceration costs and city municipal courts, et cetera. There's a huge benefit to having a crisis center. Well, by comparison, by analogy, I would say that having some mechanism where we can put folks and give them access to treatment, even if they can't pay for it, is going to be the only thing I can point to. I know of nothing else. Now, the cynic in me says, and how much money are we going to spend for folks who are never going to get clean? They're going to relapse, et cetera, et cetera. All good, all valid points. But at this point, we have nothing else for these folks, and they have no mechanism to pay, the ones who we're seeing in court daily. It strips them of any ability they might have ever had, assuming they had it in the first place, to get a job, to keep a job. You cannot function on this stuff, and so we're seeing the natural consequences of in our cases. So one of the things I was going to point out here in this slide, this comes from the Wichita Police Department. These are the Part 1 offenses, they call it. It's just a description of some of the major crime indices: homicide, robbery, rape, ag assault. And this was as of, I guess, the Friday before the managers' meeting, so 2 weeks ago, I guess. And these were the numbers we were at. They're higher now, but you can. I mean, like for instance, at that time we had 15 homicides. Well, we had 13. It says 17, I think, in all of 2013. Well, we're past that now. We've hit 18 or 19 already. You just look at all these, and those numbers are going up. Again, drugs, and specifically methamphetamine, have a lot to do with that. Another thing, and I'll just point out to you, after that meeting with the manager, because I was asked the same question, Commissioner Howell, I was asked the same question that you just asked. And I went down and said, I just said all that about methamphetamine. I want to make sure it's not just my gut. So we ran the numbers. And of the cases on file as of that Friday, because I think we met on a Thursday afternoon, the very next day, so just a spot check. But the cases on file right now, active cases, how many of them have the word methamphetamine somewhere associated in it? I'm not talking an affidavit where he was out of meth and so he went and did the robbery. I'm talking it was a charge. 11% of our cases as of that Friday, just spot check, but 11% of the cases on file had at least one count of methamphetamine. Now think about that. That means they had it in their pocket when they got caught doing whatever it is they were doing. How many more people were out there looking for more when they did the robbery, when they did the, it's a staggering number. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to suggest you could easily double that number to into the 20%, and you still would probably be scratching the surface. They still had it in their pocket when we caught them, and that's 11% of my cases. I mean, I can't even point you to a close second for other things. Well, it's also this that's driving crime. There isn't a close second. It's everything else, and then meth. The next thing I was going to point out is child needed care cases. Well, I started in 97. By the early 2000s, I know our numbers, because I've seen some of the older ones. We just went back to 08 because we have very reliable data going back then. I figured a 10-year look back was probably a pretty good indicator. You can see how many sync cases we file. 582, 474. A bad year in 14 was 653, but somewhere in that 400 to 500 range. I mean, it's just pretty typical. Through the first 2 months of this year, we were filing 25 a week. That's 100 a month. That's on pace to have 1,200 sync filings at the end of the year. Now, it has leveled off a little bit, so now we're only on a pace to hit about 800, maybe 850. But school hasn't even let out yet. These kids are going to be home with these folks all day. Summertime's when the law enforcement in this community, and every community, frankly, sort of girds itself to prepare for what's going to happen when people have idle time all summer long, and it gets hot, and they go outside, they interact with their fellow citizens, and So I can't say it won't skyrocket again this summer. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic and sound alarm bells that I don't have, but these are my numbers. This is 2018. This was 2 weeks ago. This is what we were projected, 735, and it's up to pushing about 800 right now. How is this important? It's a reflection, I think, of what's going on in the community. These are individual kids, each one of these. And one other thing, too, is if I'm a county commissioner and I'm thinking forward to the future of my community, you know, these kids, as tragic as this situation is right now, these kids are going to grow up. And as they grow up in these terrible environments that they're experiencing right now, if we don't attend to them now the way we should, where are they going to be in the future? And are they going to turn to crime? Are they going to turn to further victimization? Are they going to turn to drugs? Or are they going to be well adjusted and get on with their lives? We hope for the latter. But I think the court the BOCC needs to be aware that this is going on right now, because it has, I think, at least the possibility of impacting this community long term. Talked about the areas of focus. Let's see here. Talked already about my criminal cases. And we did not run the word meth through affidavits or other collateral sources of information. These were just cases with a crime of methamphetamine possession, sale, manufacture, although there's very little of that. It's actually a charged case. We had probable cause to believe we could prove, and reasonable doubt, beyond reasonable doubt, that's on file at the time. I will note one thing. This was striking to me, just as an anecdote. That's how many meth cases we have in the juvenile division. So this is not a thing that the kids are doing. 6 cases, no 6. We had 1 so far this year. I have 11% of my cases in the adult side with meth. 1. That's not even that's a de minimis percentage. So it's not something the kids are doing. That I guess you wait till you get to graduate from AAA to major leagues before you start delving into that, I guess. And I don't ask me to explain that. I don't know why. It's good, but unfortunately we need to keep that from happening as to the adults. So that was a lot of information in a fairly short amount of time, but those are the decision packages we put together. The last thing I was going to say is, as I mentioned to the county manager last year, we were having trouble. We lost a lot of attorneys, about 4 or 5 in the span of about a 9-month period. And when you lose people, and that's not, I wish I had a collage of all the attorneys I've worked with over the 21 years I've worked in this office. It would be a lot of folks have come and gone. This work is not for everybody. It's fast-paced, it's stressful, and you see a lot of bad stuff. But it's very engaging and rewarding work. However, we sometimes lose folks. But when we lose them to the Folston-Siefkens and the private firms, that's just part of doing business. They can pay more. It's just a different quality of life. But everybody I lost in 2017, I lost to the public sector. City of Park City hired away one of my young people. Federal public defender. I don't see Eric Yost in here, so I'll throw him past the bus. But he's still one of my people. So I lost him from the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor. Lost somebody to the Johnson County DA's office. And okay, that's interesting. But what struck me most was these folks were coming to me. The young woman who went to the federal public defender came to me and said, I don't want to leave, but what they're offering to pay me, let's put it this way, they were going to pay her more than I ever made as an assistant district attorney. And I'd been in the office for 17 years when I ran for DA, or 15 years when I ran for DA. It was a $35,000 increase. And so I went to the county manager and said, I can't keep hemorrhaging people like this and keep pace with the crime that we're dealing with right now. We have 82 open homicides right now in my office. I got to keep good people here. And so he very graciously, he let me use some of my salary savings to do some adjustments. And it has, I can't say it's worked totally, but I haven't lost anybody since we did it. And what I've simply asked is that we do a salary assessment to see where we rank in other public sector jobs. I'm not particularly interested in what DAs are making in Dallas, because I'm not losing people to Dallas. I'm losing people, you have a license to practice law in Kansas, past the Kansas bar. I'm losing people within Kansas. So I'd like to just make sure that we're up. But that was the last bullet point I wanted to make. So, questions?
Questions for Mr. Bennett?
How many total attorneys do you have?
55 now.
55?
And it's broken down, the juvenile division has, that's where we keep our appellate division. We have juvenile offender, child needed care, traffic down here at the courthouse, criminal. So, spread out across two buildings.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Just, this might be for Lindsay, but on slide 5, I think two of those things are probably revenue funds, like JAG grants and asset forfeiture funds. Those are revenues to the county, I think, and the other two are expenditures. And the expenditures, those are property tax funds. Is that correct? In other words, the general fund is going from 11.7 to 12.0 million.
Right, that is a property tax supported funds. Those other ones that are listed are not property tax supported at all.
Well, appreciate you giving us a lot of information this morning. The trend charts are concerning. I mean, I don't know where this is headed, but I do. This gets back to that same argument we've had for years and years. You pay on the front end or the back end of these things. If you don't deal with it on the front end, you're going to pay more on the back end. You don't have a choice. I think most of our problems we're seeing in the community, some of it's domestic violence, and I think sink issues are related to domestic violence, but it could be related to drugs. Property crimes are related to drugs. Gang issues are related to drugs. So there's so many things that are connected. I think if you're a upstanding citizen, not dealing with drugs in your immediate culture that you live in, most likely you're not going to be impacted by a lot of these things. But there's pockets of our population are just it's rampant what's going on because of their.
Well, there's I don't ever want to be seen as dismissive or trite or glib about this, but there's not a lot of sober, mentally stable people out committing violent crime or property crime for that matter. I mean, these are folks, many of whom, I mean, there's the occasional kid who's thinks it'd be a kind of a lark to go do a thing here or there, but you get past 18, 19, 20 years of age, even though maybe your brain's not fully developed, you're not making great decisions. People aren't holding people up at gunpoint and beating their kids and things like that because they're stone sober and of sound mind and body. I mean, there are things going on, and I haven't even touched on opioids because we're not facing what other communities on the East Coast are, but and I think you all know that the sheriff and I and other stakeholders in the community are working right now to prepare for the potential for opioids to hit this community the way they have other states. But in the interim, we still have obviously an issue now with just the stuff we have in place at this point. So,
on slide 20, your numbers are interesting there. I mean, based on your testimony or your discussion, I think the meth issues are increasing, but that chart there at the bottom, I'm assuming that's to date, but even if you extrapolate that, it looks like things are actually better this year than they were last year.
Incrementally, yeah. I mean, from 11.97 to 11.83, but we're holding steady at the 11 to 12% of our cases with that.
Okay, so two other questions. You mentioned our testing is a 6-month lag time, up to 6 months. How do we compare to other cities or communities, counties? Do we have any idea what's a reasonable amount of time?
Well, and it. I could pick an answer that would upset you. I could pick an answer that would sound good. Johnson County. I talked to my counterparts up there, and we don't have much of a turnaround. Well, they also have a ton of techs, chemists. For instance, DNA. We held steady here for a very long time with the same number of DNA scientists. Johnson County had, I think, twice as many, or at least, 50, 60% more chemists than we did, and they have a considerably lower number of felonies than we do. So their turnaround time is a lot less than ours. However, it's Johnson County. They have a different dynamic, a different tax base than we do. And so to compare, that's probably not fair. Certainly not fair to Dr. Rohrig to compare. Not that they're dilatory here. They're doing Herculean task going through all this. One of the other things, too, is he has very unfortunately, and I don't mean to air anybody's private business, but he's had 2 people very, very ill, lost somebody to a cancer out of his office, and so there's been some turnover. Our ballistics testing is very delayed right now. Well, we were training somebody, and that is a long apprenticeship to become a certified ballistics person. And after they had been trained for a very long time and were getting ready to be online, they got hired away by a lab that could pay them more. So now we're back to square one. We're hiring. We've got somebody, and they're halfway through the process. It's going to be another year before we have 2 ballistic experts. So right now, one guy is doing all of the work with respect to guns in this community. So
since all the crime trends seem to be trending upward, I assume we'll probably the pipeline's getting longer, I would assume, but things are maybe getting a little bit worse on that front.
A little bit, but that's also why we're talking right now about other things we can do to help prioritize. Yeah. So.
I only have, I think, one quick question, but probably a more important question. What other communities have done? Have we looked at any other communities that have tried to solve this meth issue with treatment programs on the front end? And who are they? And we have a study. I mean, we're not the only place that's having this problem, obviously. So
no, and that's where my reference earlier to the sheriff and I don't mean to exclude anyone else. There's several stakeholders even within this room who have been a part of those conversations. Now, the example that we have sort of relied upon is Lake County, Illinois, just north of Chicago. They have a program called the Way Out program. Now, but at the same time, I must say Boston, Cincinnati, I think it was Ohio. I can't remember if it's Columbus or Cincinnati, but Boston has had a similar program. They have a different name, Way Out or something like that. Second Chance, I don't know. But what these communities have done is, and it was really because of the opioid crisis that these communities have dealt with. But you could do the same thing with methamphetamine. And this is what we're working on right now, and that is where you have a situation where somebody's caught with use weight. By that I mean personal use, not some guy with pounds of it. There's a dealer, forget it. You're going to jail. But somebody with just enough on their person that's what they're using. They are a user. They're an abuser. You pick them up, you arrest them, you cut a case, but then the question is in that moment, if we have an agreement between the court system, my office, the judges are involved to an extent in terms of just approving this process, but they're not going to get involved individually. And then the sheriff and law enforcement. And then the final component, though, and this is what we're working on now, is the place to take them. But rather than take them to jail, you cut a case, you have it all, I've got the stuff. I'll keep it on a property and evidence shelf in the event you don't do what you're supposed to do. But we take them to drug treatment. In the moment, not months later, not weeks later, we take them straight to drug treatment. They've tried this in these other communities, and they have had success. It has reduced their crime. It has reduced their homicides in those communities significantly. And so it seems like, this is the struggle in the criminal justice system right now. Where do we pay for the money? There are two mechanisms, frankly, two theories, two means that I'm aware of to address public safety. You lock up everybody who commits a crime, throw away the key. We tried that in the 80s. We sent a lot of people to prison, and it worked for a period of time. But there are collateral consequences to that, and some would argue that those collateral consequences may be worse. Or you deal with them in the moment in the community. Rather than spending $40,000 a year to lock them up in El Dorado, you spend less money per person here now to treat them, to try to help the mental issues. There's the drug alcohol treatment, or drug issues, to try to keep them from going to the pen and try to get them back on the track and get a job and pay their taxes and not be a drain on the system. And we're at a crossroads right now nationally, I think, in terms of figuring out which way we're going to go.
So to take your comment and actually make it useful here, we need to get someone.
It's always tough when I'm talking.
We need to make someone someone needs to make a fiscal analysis of this, whether it be Hugo Wall or someone, but make a fiscal argument for if you spend money this way on the front end, you'll actually save more money on the back end. That's what we need to see. And I don't know who can do that, but that's
Hugo Wall's done it right now with the crisis center. The numbers are staggering.
Right.
7-8 million for the crisis center per year. It's saving the community. If we added one thing to him, got him a doctor who could do like stitches, just minor medical, numbers go to 16-17 million a year. It's breathtaking. So by analogy, I guess my point is, instead of just throwing out, this is my gut telling me this, that is a concrete example in this community right now. We are doing something to help mental health. If we could just expand it a little, make some space for drug treatment. Okay. I don't think it's baseless to say that there is a one-to-one corollary there.
Well, we got to put our toes in the water and see how it feels.
Yes, sir.
It's time for us to do something there. And then finally, I just want to say, I know we keep talking about moving out of this building. I'm wondering, I have not seen, at least this year, a projected cost of how this is going to impact your budget, operations budget. If there's an impact of that, I guess I'd like to know more about that whenever you're ready to present that again.
In terms of space analysis?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't need that right now,
Fair
but
enough.
I'm interested in that.
Well, let me know when you want to have that discussion, and we'll put pen to paper.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation today. Piggybacking on what Commissioner Howell just said, so with these, your budget request, I totally understand the need with the additional people. Makes sense, supportive of it. And do you actually have space to throw more people? And that's not facetious. It's
well, let's put it this way. For instance, the tech person that we hired a couple of years ago, he had an office for a long time. He's now in a cubicle. And we'll make space for as long as we can, and if we have to, we'll move someone back to juvenile. You have given us the GIS,
right.
So we're going to move some folks there, which will, 10 years from now, no, I can't go like this for 10 more years. Can I go like this for another 2?
Well, hopefully it won't be that long. You can ask the manager.
I'm a team player.
I harass him about this weekly.
I understand. I guess my point is I'm not up here haranguing you about this because I understand this is not an easy task, and I know a lot of effort and work's going into this. So I'm treading water right now, waiting for the process to take care of itself. So.
And then on the mental health and drug treatment facility and everything, I mean, you can ask Commissioner Dennis. I think we talk about it every day, and I hear him talking to Dave Unruh every day. Frankly, there's probably no long-term plan that's discussed more up here than the need. And I think that trip to San Antonio, while long and arduous and somewhat exhausting, was it ignited a lot. So
that, quite a program down there.
Yeah. So that's something that we are discussing on a daily basis up here. If not daily, it seems like almost every other time. And then with the salary assessment, is that something that Lindsay we would go through CFO for the salary assessment that he's asking for, or is that?
Well, we have actually been working with him already on that.
Okay.
So we've been talking about this for about a year. So.
Okay. Well, it sounds necessary, so whatever we need to do to start that assessment would be great.
And again, to be very clear, it may well be that what we've done in the last 18 months working with, or not even that, 9 months working with the county manager, I have no doubt has put us in better stead than we would have otherwise been. But I just want to make sure that we're where we need to be. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mark, for being here today. We sincerely appreciate it. I know we're trying to figure out something to do with your space problem. 23rd, we're supposed to have another discussion, and I hope that this commission can come up with some decisions to help us move forward on the 23rd.
All right.
Your discussions on mental health, on drug and alcohol abuse, and then we also tied to that is the homeless issue. That's something that is forefront of my thoughts. Matter of fact, this morning I had a meeting with GWP, and they're getting involved in it now. So I think our community is facing the problem that we've got. Now we've got to find, first of all, I know you're part of the group that's putting together this grant that the sheriff wants to get through. If we can get that, we can get this person identified to spearhead the efforts and then figure out where we can go to get the resources in order to do kind of a mini version of what they're doing down in Bexar County in Texas. I think
and the state
will,
wants to help too, and we've had our meetings with the state.
Yeah,
and Secretary Keck is involved in everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
So,
well, credit where it's due. Secretary Keck is stepping up to have this conversation. The Crime Commission here in Wichita has expressed interest in helping to pay for this position. One other thing, Commissioner Howell, there's also a bill that I have floated quietly for the last couple of years, trying to get some consensus on with the legislature. That I'm going to maybe call the question this next session. I'll bring it to you all and ask for I'll at least inform you what you choose to do. If you want to support it or not, it's up to you. But this would be another thing we could do. It would give judges more discretion. I'm not going to spend another 20 minutes talking about it, but it would also assist in this endeavor to give people an incentive to get the treatment they need, to take it seriously, because there's another option we need to give judges that they don't currently have in Kansas. That would really help, I believe, incentivize people getting healthy, off drugs, getting the mental health treatment they need, and getting their lives back together. So, thank you all.
well, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, what's next on our agenda?
Monday morning at 9 a.m., we'll have 8 presentations.
Very good.
Actually, next agenda is Founders Luncheon at Intrust Bank Room.
Yep, I know we've all got a meeting outside of the building now, so we'll head to that. Thank you all.